think we're in good shape. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Vona.
Well, I do appreciate the chance to come out and talk to you guys tonight. There's been a lot going on with elections. As you know, we've had several elections this year. And in the meantime, we've been working on what they call the vote centers, or the countywide polling places. We did have one of your members, Ski Lauer, served on our committee, and I'm really glad we invited her to participate because she got out and got a lot of things done to help us. She got us a lot of speaking engagements and so forth to try to get the word out to people that we might be implementing that so that our commissioners could hear from people and hear what they wanted to do. And I'm very appreciative of our commissioners, the way that they helped us with this project. They went out and did town hall meetings. I don't know if any of you knew they were doing that or not. We tried to get the word out as much as we could. We do have Commissioner Bacon here tonight. He actually conducted two in his district, and so he got quite a bit of feedback, I think, from his folks. And he's my new spokesman from the Commissioners Court because he presented it better than I do. So we may bring him up and let him talk to you about vote centers. But if you haven't heard about the vote center concept, it's going to be where voters can go to any of the 18 sites that we have open on election day and vote, regardless of where they're registered. But what you have to understand is this is a step-by-step process. We had to do our public hearing and build all of our data and take it to Commissioners Court. Commissioners Court voted to apply to the Secretary of State's office. Secretary of State's going to look at the people that have applied. They only have 6 slots for our population available statewide. So we're competing with anybody else that wants to come in and try to implement those if they're 100,000 or more population. We do feel like we've got a pretty good chance. We sent the packet off today, and we built, I feel like, a very good packet with the help of everybody that's participated. And they'll review it, and then we'll hear from them. We have until September the 11th, their deadline to let us know if it's been approved or not is September the 11th. But we're hoping that we hear sooner than that. We had the opportunity, my staff and I, except for Rudy, had the opportunity to go up to Lubbock County. And Lubbock County is the first county in the state that did vote centers. They were available in 2008, and they had no rules, they had no procedures, they had no guidelines on how to implement vote centers. So Lubbock County got to make the rules and build the guidelines that we all use today. And so they were doing a runoff election. They had a whole 5 precincts that were holding on Saturday. But it gave us the opportunity to go up and kind of see how they do things in the vote center environment. And we really, really enjoyed getting to see all of that. I think if you've ever early voted at one of our early voting locations, you're going to find it works much like that. And that's what they had happening on election day. It's just that voters have more freedom. And we tried to place the centers in places that we think will be convenient to people, that are on bus routes or within walking distance of a bus stop, that serve communities that maybe aren't as mobile as other locations and so forth. We do have the proposed sites on our webpage. If you don't know our webpage, it's votetomgreencounty.org. And we try to keep sample ballots, election dates, polling places, precinct maps, vote center information, things that are going on. We try to keep that on our webpage. And I'm very proud, and I credit my staff, Rudy Olivas and Miriam Granados, because they've enabled us to be, as far as I know, the only county in the state that has everything we have on the webpage is also available in Spanish. And so that's their hard work that's made that happen. But we did have Vote Center 101 kind of information, basic information of what vote centers will do for you and where the locations are, maps and so forth that you can look at. Elections this year, the only one we have left in Knockwood right now is the November election. That'll be the general election, and we are hearing that the city may have some charter amendments or some kind of an issue on the ballot. There will be a constitutional amendment on the ballot, which is unusual. We don't normally have that with a general election in even-numbered years. But they have proposed one constitutional amendment to come on that ballot as well. So we may have a pretty full ballot to implement with our vote center environment. Important part that you need to help everybody understand with the vote centers is that on election day, because of the way the law is written, you will not be able to vote using a paper ballot in the vote center environment. We are going to still have them available in our early voting, but you won't have paper on election day. So that's going to be the biggest difference that everybody will see. But we hope that it'll be kind of a trade-out, being able to go at any of the locations versus having to get back to your home place versus the paper. We hope that'll work out well. We do, Lylene had originally talked to me about maybe doing some training for volunteer deputy registrars tonight, but because we didn't have anybody enrolled, we chose not to do that. We do conduct training for volunteer deputy registrars once a month, and it's the third Wednesday of every month. We flip the times, and usually it's at 3:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes we'll do one at 5:30 because we realize some folks work and they might not be able to make the training. We do ask that you schedule attendance so that we know how many are coming and you can get your certificates and so forth available. What is a volunteer deputy registrar? That's a person that can go out and actually accept voter registration applications or voter registration changes. You have to be trained and certified to be able to do that unless you're a relative, like mother or son or daughter or something like that. So we do those trainings. They're good until December 31st of even numbered years. So it will expire at the end of this year, but you're still, we're still more than happy to train you to be a volunteer registrar. And we do count on those folks to help us get their information updated or registered. We also have used our volunteer registrars in some unique ways. In the 2008 presidential election, the last week before the deadline to get registered, we had people lining up to get registered. The last day you could have registered with, we had 800 applications coming in. And so my staff couldn't keep up with that. We just couldn't do the election stuff that we needed to do. So we picked up the phone and called our volunteer registrars and said, hey, can you come in and help us? You guys know how to accept these applications. You know what people need to do. We put them in 2-hour shifts and they were a godsend to us. They also, we utilize them sometimes to go out to like nursing homes or different facilities that want to have some kind of voter registration drive so that they can go out and get folks registered. For the presidential, again, we had Shannon Hospital called us and they wanted a 24-hour shift of volunteer registrars at the hospital. So we did 2-hour shifts, again, even 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning. So I truly love, as I do all my poll workers and so forth, I appreciate our volunteer registrars because they help us immensely in a lot of ways. We also are always looking for poll workers. If any of you don't know what a poll worker does, that's the folks that are sitting in the poll when you go in to vote. And they check you in or they give you your ballot or whatever. We don't make it hard for you to be a poll worker except for the long hours and for filling out the paperwork and so forth. And that's another benefit we're hoping to gain from vote centers is that we won't have as much paperwork for our poll workers to do. The average age of our poll worker in Tom Green County is 75. So you gotta know these folks have been doing it for a long time. They're getting really tired, the equipment's heavy, it's very difficult for them to come and do a full hour. So we're always looking for recruits. We've got to find ways to get some youth involved. As you all know, we don't have enough youth involved in the whole voting process. And actually, we don't have a whole lot of people involved in voting at all anymore. If you look at the numbers of voter turnout, it's very, very sad. And that's a committee maybe I'll form a little bit later where we can go out and try to see what we can do to increase voter turnout. But that's a big picture, I think. It's not just here. It's statewide and nationwide. So. Let me think what else we do in the elections office. We do the voter registration as well. So we've got anybody that's moving into our county or that's deceased or whatever, we have to cancel their voter registration and send that into the team. The Secretary of State's the official voter registrar for the state of Texas. We're what we call an offline county. We have our own voter registration packet where we do all the data entry, send that file to the Secretary of State. They run it against Social Security to verify deceased folks. They run it against several different databases and so forth to try to identify possible felons and all of that. People that have moved from our county, maybe registered in another county or even in another state, and they send it back to us and then we have to do the examinations or whatever's required from that. So people walk in and they're like, what are you doing here? You don't have an election going on. Well, trust me, we still have a lot of things to do. We're going to try to do at least 2 mock elections, what we call mock elections. It's just like a real election based on the vote center environment so that we can make sure we know all the procedures we need to implement, all the things we need to do. So if you're interested in coming and participating in our mock election, give the office a call at 659-6541 and we'll sign you up and let you know when we're doing the election. You can come and help us vote and watch the whole procedure. So not only do we need poll workers in the polls on election day, but we have people that help us on the dock, and they help us in the office that evening. So we have lots of opportunities for anybody that really wants to get involved with us. So, I'll take questions if y'all have questions, as long as you're not too hard on me.
I raised my hand up and discovered that I was going to be a precinct chairman. And I read some of the details about what that involves, and one of them is being a judge on election day. And I'm wondering whether you're going to have people like me at these practice elections in order to understand how and in what manner we participate.
Okay, he got voluntold to be a precinct judge, is what it sounds like. And you know, it depends on the party and it depends on their procedures and how they implement that. There's some places where just because you're a precinct chair, you're not necessarily a precinct judge. But yes, we're going to entertain anybody and everybody that wants to come participate in the mock election. And we do plan, for those of you that do not know necessarily how we get our judges and alternate judges in the county, the parties, whichever party got the most votes for governor is the judge in a precinct, and then the second highest is the alternate judge. So in Tom Green County, we have 3 precincts right now that have Democrat judges, all the rest are Republican. And we had to implement what we're going to do in the vote center environment, and we actually had 2 of the places that are Democrats are still going to be there, but we assigned another one so that we still have 3 Democrat judges and the rest are Republican. Now, those names are submitted by the party chairs. They submit a list of people to be appointed to serve as those precinct judges and alternate judges. And then I take that to the Commissioner's Court, and they appoint those people for an annual term. I'm supposed to have that list by the end of July, and the appointments will be done in August. So you may worm out, you may still not have to be a precinct judge, but we'd love to have you, don't get me wrong. But you're actually going to be...
I really want to be there.
Good.
I was a poll watcher once years ago back in Beaumont, Texas, which is a yellow dog Democrat here. And you ran a yellow dog, everybody vote for it. And I was there a minute and a half, and a nice woman came in and they handed her her ballot, and the man handing her the ballot said, "Oh, if you just want to vote straight for Democrat, you just check this box right here."
Yep.
And I thought, that doesn't sound right to me.
That's absolutely correct. That is not right.
The election officials should be doing that, you know.
Right, yeah, no, you're right on target. So anyway, they'll submit the list to us. If we don't get the list in a timely manner, then we come up with names. That's why we always ask people that are interested in participating to give us a call and let us sign them up as a possible poll worker. And for every election that we do, we have poll worker training. And it's usually, if we do the intensive one, it's 4 hours. When we were in Lubbock the other day, I said, "How long does your training take?" They do 6 to 8 hours worth of training. We're able to pay a stipend of $15 thanks to the Commissioner's Court for your time to come and train. We didn't used to have that, which doesn't sound like a lot for 4 hours, but we do train and go through the whole process of processing voters and so forth.
You use that to buy ammo.
Yeah, well, there you go. So anyway, if you are appointed, we do training for you, and we don't leave you hanging high and dry. We try to support you. Yes, ma'am.
Now, I worked at the last election as kind of an emergency fill-in, but I want to learn more how to do the paperwork after the election. And the gal who I was working under, she did it all. You know, we did some stuff, but I'd really like to learn how to do that. Now, do you train people how to do that kind of stuff at the...
We don't normally, that's been a request we've had for a while that I've had on my back burner to do, is to develop a class for paperwork at the end of the night. You know, unfortunately, the judge is the one that's responsible for that paperwork, and the alternate judge has to kind of sign off on that. So we have some of our judges that are like, you know, let me just think, go away, let me just think about how I need to do this. And then we have other judges that are very welcoming and very kind, and they're like, here, come here, let me show you. And we try to push that as much as we can. But we're more than happy. Peggy's my paperwork guru. She's more than happy to sit down with anybody and go over how to do different things. So you're welcome to come into the office and visit with her, and she can show you how. Give us a little bit of time, because we're going to have to develop the paperwork we're going to use in the vote center environment. But yeah, we'll work with you if you're interested in learning that.
And another thing is, a lot of people want to stick with paper ballots. And so I wondered if they could have a ballot thing, electronic, that isn't really hooked up, so they can figure out how to do it. before they go into
We
the-
only have 3 demo units, and I actually looked into, when we started talking about vote center environment, looked into maybe buying some more so that we could have one at every location. Sad part of that is they're $30,000. And so I'm not prepared to spend that much money just for a demo unit. It costs that much more, I mean, about that for a brand new unit. And I'm trying to do all of this without purchasing more equipment. Because, you know, we've had this equipment since 2006, so it's kind of getting older and older and older. So, but we do have the demo units at our office. We have one set up all the time. I brought one tonight for anybody that wants to. I'll go over how to use it with them. We have a how-to, we have Facebook now, which we didn't have until we started Vote Center. But we have Facebook, and we have an actual demonstration of how to use the equipment and so forth there. So we're trying to get the word out as much as we can. Along with the volunteer deputy registrar training, we're going to implement a once a month, same day, Wednesday, voting 101, where voters can come in and we'll kind of talk about how you get checked in, how you vote, and so forth, to try to get people that maybe want to come in and get more familiar with the process as well. Yes, sir.
I also have a question along the lines of the paper ballot. Can you help us understand the reasoning behind removing that as an option on election day? Because it seems like some of these scandals like the IRS and the VA and government computers, there's a lot of manipulation going on. And that's kind of our concern, you know, my concern is that not saying that Tom Green County would do that, but that's a concern that I have personally. And can you help us understand the reasoning behind that?
I will try. His question is, why are we eliminating paper ballots on election day with the vote center environment? There's a little distrust and so forth. And you'll hear us talk about with vote centers live connectivity. Have you heard us talking about we have to have live connectivity? We have to have the ability in every one of the polls that we're going to have open in the vote centers have connectivity so that they're talking to each other. That is only for voter check-in. So that if you come to my poll and check in that you're voting, and then try to go over to Kat's and check in, it's telling her you've already voted at my poll. That's the only thing that's going to be hooked up to the internet. The hard equipment is never connected to internet, ever. Ever. So that's one thing that gives me a lot of peace, is I know people can't go in through the back door and manipulate the data and so forth. There's also a lot of internal security measures. We have what we call a little ECM key that identifies certain things through that whole election process that is built-in security so that somebody can't hack into stuff. Hart, in my opinion, is the best vendor for security that they've implemented. So that's one. The reason why we can't have paper is the legislature wrote the law that way. And I think I'm really glad they did, and I'll tell you part of why I feel that way. We had one election where we had the school board, the city, I forget what all we had on the ballot, but we ended up with 72 different ballot styles. In other words, I had to have 72 different precincts with different issues available on election day, but it was by precinct. So if you're in precinct 108, for example, we might have some ballots that have very best school district on them. We might have some that have Wall School District on them. We might have some that don't have any school district on them, just in 108. And then he might be in 112, same dynamics. One would have very best, one would have Wall, one would have nothing. It's easy when it's just by precinct, because then I only have to send 3 different kinds of ballots to you and 3 different kinds to him. In the vote center, where 108 and 112 and 137, and everybody can come into that poll, to have enough paper in 18 locations for 72 ballot styles would be a managing nightmare. So I think that was their intent in not providing them on election day, was so that you can logistically do it much better and not have the potential of so many people maybe getting the wrong ballot, and knowing that you've got enough availability. It's absolutely a lot easier to manage electronic, because you can present any ballot style to a voter with the electronic equipment. With the paper, you actually have to go find that ballot style to be sure you're giving it to the right voter. So I think that's why they designed it that way. Yes, sir.
About 10 years ago in Beaumont, we had a very close mayoral election, and Patsy and I were asked to be on the panel that did the recount. And we sat there for 3 days with hanging chads and IBM cards and, sorting them, the ones that were clear and the ones that were questionable and so forth. How do you do that with electronic voting?
With electronic voting, and I've not had to do a request for a recount since we went to electronic, so this is based on my understanding. But if a person requests a recount, all we're required to do is rerun the MBBs. And MBB stands for mobile ballot box. That's what's recording all the votes that are cast on each piece of equipment. So we're required only to rerun those. However, a candidate can make the request for a recount that we print those ballots out. Internally, every ballot that's cast is saved in like 3 different locations. It's saved on the judge's booth controller, it's saved on the e-slate itself, and it's saved on the mobile ballot box. So if a candidate comes in and says, I want you to print them all, I want everyone eyeballed, you're going to recount all of those by paper, we have to notify them when we're going to print them out. We print them, and then we sit down with the county committees and we recount them.
Lois Lerner's not involved in that issue.
No, not in my county, I'll put it that way. The only thing I've ever seen that's really subjective to voter recounts is paper ballots. Because our ballot board spends time resolving ballots that have come in that have been voted by mail. And somebody might have made a big X, and then they might have made a little mark in the other box. And so they have to, as a committee, there's usually 5, make the decision of what the voter's intent was at that point. That's the only subjectiveness that comes into the whole process. The other thing is where they're having to duplicate ballots. Again, that's a paper ballot thing. If a voter has voted in such a way that we can't get it to go through the e-scan or the ballot now counting equipment, then the ballot board has to duplicate that ballot in such a way that it shows what the voter meant to do, and then it's scanned, and that's room for human error, in my opinion. We have, when we do duplicate ballots, we have no less than 3 people sitting there doing it. One's marking, one's calling, and one's observing to make sure that's what's being called and it's what's being marked. And thank goodness we don't have to duplicate very many. But that's where, to me, that's what will affect a count, is those things. Yes, sir.
Are they equal party?
Yes, sir. The only unequal part of it is, again, if you have 5 members, you have a judge on the ballot board, and that is representative of the county. We have a Republican judge, we have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Okay.
Next, to respond to the gentleman behind me about, I've heard these horror stories of people going in and they get their ballot to vote and it's already marked. Either party, Democrat mostly.
Yeah.
How in the world is that happening, and does it happen? Have you ever been witness to that?
He is saying that he's heard the horror stories of somebody going in and getting their ballot and it's already marked. And I guarantee you, if you ever have that happen, I want a phone call and I'm going to go out and I'm going to investigate, because I don't know how it's happening, quite frankly. When we prepare the ballots, we print them, we count them, we put them in a bag, and we seal them. And they're not unsealed until that judge goes in to sign them. Now, if I've got a judge that's doing that kind of thing, we need to take them to the DA.
But in electronic voting, though, that's supposedly not possible.
You're right. In electronic voting, he's saying that's not possible. And there's a lot of things that are not possible in electronic voting. On paper ballots, you can actually overvote, which means that if there's only 2 candidates and you can only vote for one and you mark both boxes, you've overvoted and nobody from that race is going to get a vote. You can't do that on electronic. It's only going to let you select the correct number of choices. So that won't happen. You won't have anybody that can pre-mark a ballot for you, because when you go in to vote with electronic, you're going to step up to what we call the judge's booth controller. You're going to present your precinct label to them. They're going to find that precinct. They're going to pull that ballot. They're going to enter that into the judge's booth controller, and it's going to print out what's called an access code for you. And then you take that over and you step up to the machine and you're entering that access code, and it's presenting you with the ballot. Now, we still have a problem sometimes with our poll workers maybe selecting the wrong ballot style. So I encourage you anytime you're voting to make sure you get what you feel like you're supposed to be voting on before you cast ballot. Because once you cast ballot, we can't fix it. We can't do anything about it. It's done. So no, you won't have anybody that can pre-mark a ballot for you. And if you ever have that happen, please call me because I want to address the situation.
Well, I would think that it could happen without people even knowing, because they walk in there and get their paper ballot and it's already marked. They don't notice it. And
Well, I would think it would catch it, quite frankly, because they're going to know what they want to mark. And if they happen to mark something and somebody else, I mean, our equipment can be very sensitive. And if you've just laid your pen down within one of those boxes and you've marked the other one, oftentimes it'll kick it back out when you take it up to the e-scan, which, by the way, is also electronic. Everything we have is electronic in one manner or another. When you scan it through, it's electronically recording that ballot. But it should kick it back out if it's seeing what might could be an overvote at that point, and I would think that would call your attention to it. But I honestly have not heard it happening in Tom Green County, thank God.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I'll
Let me go to this side of the room for just a second. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us more about the electronic device? It sounds like it's pretty foolproof with all the safety features, but the device itself, like, is there a way to test it to make sure it's doing it right in each county? Is there some kind of measure set up for that? And can you tell us who the manufacturer is, or like, is everybody getting brand new devices now that they have to go by? Is there a standard for that, or?
Okay.
Just can you tell us more about the?
Okay, let me see if I can remember all your questions. If I don't, get me back. Our vendor is Hart InterCivic. There's ES&S and Hart InterCivic, and there's one more in Premier or Diebold. I can't remember what the name of it is now. Every vendor that sells voting equipment, nationwide certification process. In other words, they are extensively tested and have vigorous requirements to make sure that all the security's in there, that the equipment's going to be durable, that it's going to stand up, and so forth. And that's why you haven't seen a whole lot of, you know, our computers, they change by the time we buy them and walk out the door. Your voting equipment has not been doing that because the certification process is so rigorous, the vendors could not afford to keep improving it. Now, Hart is working on a new product. We paid $800,000 for what we initially bought for voting equipment. And the other day I took the workbook that Hart sent me for the new product. I don't know what all we need yet. I was just kind of playing with figures. And to replace it with what I think we need, close your ears, Rick, $688,000. And so we don't know where that money's going to come from to replace the voting equipment. But I do know that they have to meet certain requirements and certain guidelines to be able to be certified to produce a product for voting. The electronic, Hart built it in such a way, you walk up and you think it's like a touch screen. You know, some of the vendors do have touch screens, but Hart designed ours to where you actually roll a wheel to make your selection and then press enter to mark that selection. And it's much more durable because of the way they built it. You would not believe how much those things get kicked around, knocked around, dropped, picked up, moved. And so I'm very glad that they built it to be as durable as it is, because the other day I went to pick something up and everything started falling and kabang, kabang, kabang. And I could have easily damaged it and had the cost to get it fixed and so forth. So they tried to design it to where the voter can see what they're doing. You roll that wheel and you see what your options are. You mark it. After you've marked everything you can mark, and you can skip one. A lot of people don't realize you can skip a race if you don't want to vote on it. But you can skip it. When you're down to the end of that ballot, it gives you a summary page to show you what you voted on. And it gives you the option to go back and make a change to that. Or if you missed one, it lets you go back and include that vote as well. Once you're through reviewing all the summary pages, that's when you cast ballots. So you've got plenty of opportunity to look at what you're voting for. And our poll workers are trained to come help you. If you're not familiar with it, and you don't know how to use it, they're more than happy to step up and help you use it. And like I say, we've got a demo unit downtown. I've got one tonight if you want to come try. Kat tried this one a little bit earlier. Wasn't that bad, was it?
No.
Unless you do a write-in. Now, the write-in's a little bit more tedious, but just voting's not that bad. So, did I get all your questions?
No.
Okay.
The certification process, do you know who's in charge of that? Or what agency's in charge of that process?
I honestly don't at this point. I think it was the election commission to begin with, but I don't know where it's at right now. I'm sorry, I don't know that.
And the people that designed that, you know, the people that are certified, where they're chosen from or who they are?
I again don't know that. I know that it was put into play, I believe, when Help America Vote Act was passed. And so a commission was formed to develop the guidelines that they would use for the certification and so forth. But I don't know who's appointing those people right now, and I don't know who's actually overseeing it at this point. I do know that the president appointed an election commission after the 2012 election that looked at a lot of processes. Tom Green County was blessed and we didn't experience it, but apparently in some of the other states, they had long waiting lines, they had a lot of issues with early voting hours being cut. And I don't understand that. By law, we're prescribed what hours we have to be open. There's no wiggle room, we have to be open those hours. So I don't really understand what all the issues were. And you know, a lot of times I hear people talking about have the same laws across the whole United States. Well, it sounds good in theory, but I like the way we do things. I wouldn't want to necessarily do the way they do it in New York or Vermont or Ohio or somewhere else. So, but I do know they had an election commission that was formed with several different state people. And one of the people that served on that committee was a lady that used to work at the elections division in the Secretary of State's office. Very knowledgeable, been doing it a long, long time, so I was thrilled to see her on the committee because I think she'll kind of help keep some sanity. You know, she knows the process, and I think she'll help keep some sanity to that whole process. So, is that it? Okay. Yes, sir?
I bet part of the problem they had was that there was a woman on TV in Chicago that voted 6 times for President Obama. That's why the lines were so long.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm like, really? How did that happen? I don't know, you know.
Well, dead people in Chicago voted.
Yeah, you vote early and vote often.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, you kind of hit on the cost a little bit. I just have 2 quick things. How do you see the cost affecting the cost to have elections in the future? You know, what it costs us to hold them. And number 2, how do you see it affecting voter turnout?
Cost, I don't think is really going to affect voter turnout. It's whatever.
It's 2 separate.
Yeah. Okay, the cost, you know, that's kind of more of a commissioner question. But what we are able to do when the Help America Vote Act came into play, any equipment that was used by the county, or excuse me, any dollars that was used by the county to purchase that equipment, it made it what we call HAVA, Help America Vote Act equipment. And so anytime I'm leasing that to any entity that I'm conducting an election for, we are able to charge them for the use of that equipment. And I went before the commissioners and we actually, the auditor did a formula of depreciation and so forth, and he set a price, and we review that occasionally. And that's what I lease that to everybody for. All of those funds go into a separate account. Commissioners, they don't get to touch it. We get to use it. But it's going to take me a really long time to build up $688,000. So at some point, it's going to have an effect on the court if we have to get equipment sooner rather than later without any grant funds and so forth. Now, on the voter question, you know, I don't know what's affecting it. I don't know what we're going to do. And as I said earlier, in some committee I'd like to form at some point that we can go out and ask people why they're not voting and see what we can do. I've had theories of apathy, I've had theories of confusion, which I'm hoping vote centers will help that a little bit, that voters will know, hey, I can go anywhere, I don't have to worry about where I'm registered. Lack of understanding of the system, I'm really not sure what's causing that problem. I'd like to resolve it. I think I saw another hand. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, it's kind of for Chris too, that with his first question, was he considering the fact that some people are saying vote online, as which would, of course, cut down a lot on your expenses, but then it opens it up to many other, but you hear that vote online.
You do, and there's some states that do it all by mail, which, you know, there's pros and cons to everything. Voting by mail has a lot of potential gaps in it, and so I'm not sure I'd want to go that way. If we ever went to internet voting, I think you'd have to find a new elections administrator, because I wouldn't want to try to oversee that. So the cost, I think the commissioners have taken a positive approach with the vote centers. Initially, my understanding is it costs a little bit more to implement it, because A, you got to let a lot of people know what we're doing, and B, we're going to have to probably staff up in the polls so that we have more people. But eventually, they do see a little bit of cost savings, because we've gone from 26 polling places to 18. Right there, you've got that many less polling places that you're having to pay for staff, you're having to pay for equipment, you're having to pay for delivery and so forth. So I think the commissioners have taken a positive step in that direction to save and reduce costs. But I also think we all don't feel like that's the primary goal of what we want to do. I mean, the commissioners have a lot of budget they have to deal with, but I think they realize and understand the importance of our right to vote, and they're supporting me. I hear a lot of counties that have to fight their commissioners court for every dime they get, and I feel blessed that I don't have to do that in our court. Yes, sir? Did you have a question?
668,000, and not figure about $10 a vote.
Well, you don't want to go into the cost of vote, you know. I think Judge Floyd's done some figuring, and Rick may have, on each election that we have, how much it cost us to run that election and how many turned out. And it can be very depressing, so I try not to do that very often. Yes?
The internet's always going down at times when you need it to be up. I know that because we use an application at work and it has to be up, and still our electronic records aren't always up. What is your backup plan for when one of your stations goes down and does not have internet access?
Okay, his question is, internet goes down. We all have seen that happen, and what's our backup for the vote centers? Because we are required to have that. We have been doing some testing. We have MiFi, which seems to be very solid, and that we're very hopeful that we will have. A lot of the locations, well, let me back up. Every location that we're going to has internet connection and so forth. So we've got like 2 or 3 layers there. But we also have the ability, one county said that it happened and it was only a short period, but they were still able to check in voters. It's just that Cat wouldn't know you were checked in over at his poll. So they get on the phone and they call us downtown, and we have what we call an administrative side, where we can be checking in the voters that Cat's processing, so you know, or vice versa. So it's an unknown at this point. We're also printing some paper backups for them to be able to look voters up. But I have to tell you, all the years I've been here, our early voting for the primary runoff, the last hour and a half we did without electricity. On Friday, our lights went off. We had an hour and a half, no power. Our laptops stayed up. We were able to keep looking voters up. The hardest part was actually getting them down the hall without any lights. We had flashlights stationed all over the place to get them in. The second hardest thing was finding the ballot they needed paper-wise to give them to vote. So I haven't had to face it, but there are counties that have implemented vote centers that if it's going to be a lengthy amount of time, and I'm not prepared to go a real long time, they just close that vote center and redirect the voters. That's the beauty of vote centers. You don't have to be precinct driven. You can go to any of them. So we're hoping that they're close enough that the voters won't mind that if I'm having a problem over here, I can say we're closing this one and direct you to one of the others, or all the others.
The connectivity that you're talking about and the cross-verification in real time is not the problem that the voting queen in Chicago managed to implement. What she'd done apparently was voted absentee and then showed up and voted also.
Right.
Do you have a database of all the absentee votes on election day, so that not only you check to make sure they didn't vote at another voting center, but that they haven't also cast an absentee ballot, and is that up and running for early voting also?
Good question. Did everybody hear his question? Okay. Yes, our database, and again, I'm blessed with the vendor that we got. We got Votech as our vendor, and they offer a product that we use for election day check-in called Vote Safe. And as we have ballots by mail that we mail out, their record is marked. They had a ballot sent to them via mail, okay? As it comes back in, I go into that database and I indicate that ballot's come back. So if you show up on election day and they pull you up, it's going to say one of two things. Voter was mailed a ballot or voter returned their ballot, okay? So I'm sitting there as a poll worker. VoteSafe is designed to where I can't go ahead and check you in on election day because that's on your record. We have been trying to work with our vendor because by law, if you bring that ballot back in with you when you're voting on election day, I have to give you a regular ballot. I can't check you in over here. So we're working on the method to be able to go ahead and process you. We know you're not going to get voted both ways because you're physically turning in that ballot. But we do have a lot of checks and balances on the ballot by mail in our county, yes, sir. And, what was I going to say?
And if all else fails, you call the NSA and find out how we all vote.
vote.
I don't know how they're going to do that. It's very secret. But anyway, we do have those checks and balances. Did I see another hand over there somewhere? Y'all aren't running out of questions, are you?
You didn't happen to try to hire the company that made Obamacare, did you?
No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, did they come to you, or, because we
When we had a voter registration packet when we had to change vendors on that decided they didn't have enough customers. We actually went out and looked at the possible vendors, and Secretary of State has a product called TEAM, and I forget what it stands, Texas Election something Management, that was designed with the HAVA funds again, Help American Vote Act. It's free, and you get what you pay for.
free.
No, I mean, it's a good product, but when I first started in the office, you could go and try to look up a voter, and there were so many people statewide on the system. You pull that voter, enter that voter's name, and hit enter, and you go and you have a cup of coffee, and you talk to the people down the hall, and you know. And I had Vanessa when we were looking for a vendor. She went over to Ballinger. Everybody knows where Ballinger is, how big it is, right? Hour and a half to get that voter pulled up. And I said, that's not the way to go. So we looked at the different vendors. We went to them. They came and displayed the product, and we made the choice. Team is much better now, by the way. It's much, much better now. Okay. Anything else?
Are you going to, how many of the, well, for instance, precinct like at Knickerbocker is 423, I think.
That's correct.
Is it going to be closed?
Yes.
Like a lot of the others out, or what?
Yes.
You mean to tell them that we got to drive into town, or what?
We're going to have Cristobal open. We kept 4 rural boxes. We kept
That's
Cristobal.
farther away.
I know. We kept Cristobal, we kept Great Creek, we kept Very Best, and we kept Wall. But Knickerbocker, one of our issues with Knickerbocker, you know, the connectivity you were talking to earlier, was we had challenges with being able to get good connectivity out there so that we could make sure voters weren't voting in 2 places for one. Being able to, you know, we have the connectivity issue. We went out, I promised you, we went out and tested our internet connections and so forth. And I have people all the time talk about phone problems and so forth. So at this time, we're not having Knickerbocker open.
That's good. I mean, I guess
It is what it is. Okay, y'all are a pretty easy group. Thank you very much.
Thank you.